Hey everybody, welcome to J Stern Designs. This is an exciting week for us because it's the last week of the high school volleyball season and East Catholic has made it to the finals, so there will be a little bit more volleyball, in the upcoming weeks. But during the last week we have a special Dig Pink game, which is a fundraiser for breast cancer, and that's on Tuesday. And then Thursday or Friday, I think it's Friday, we have our senior night, which is really cool too. And what that means for me is I have a lot of projects I have to get done really fast. I'm going to be making a quilt for the raffle for the Dig Pink game. And I just want to show you quickly. All right, I'm going to use this volleyball as the idea for my quilt. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually blow it up. So, I'm going to make pieces that are maybe 36 inches across a volleyball. And then I'll use the fleece and I'll applique it onto a fleece background. So it'll be very similar to the little whale quilt I made for the baby quilt I made last week. So I'm going to do that for the Dig Pink game for the raffle. And just, on an aside note, if you guys have any local fundraisers going on, to support breast cancer, I encourage you to, do your part and buy a raffle ticket or donate something or support the cause. I think everybody knows somebody who's struggling with breast cancer, and I think it's amazing that there are so many different organizations and fundraisers and things that support that. I encourage everybody, if you have a minute and there's something going on locally, take advantage of that and help out if you can. I will be sporting my Dig Pink t-shirt, and I have my daughter's name and number on the back, so I'm super excited to wear that tomorrow and show my support for breast cancer. And I'll be very busy doing the quilt, probably right up to the minute I have to get there. All right, so that's what I'll be doing this week. I also have senior t-shirts to do, and I'll be embroidering or sewing those, and I'll be making little quilts for the seniors as well. So this is going to be a super volleyball craft project week for me, and I'll be posting my progress on Facebook, so you'll be able to see, how things are going. Really excited. All right, so because I have all of this sewing to do for the volleyball team, Pant knit jeans are going to pick up next week, but I did promise to do a tutorial to show how to fix a pant leg if you cut it too short. This goes along with my craftsy class that I'm teaching. The name of that class is Sewing Mistakes, What Can Go Wrong and How to Make It Right. And during that class, which by the way is really for beginners, I talk about what to do if you're hemming pants that you've made or jeans or whatever, and you cut it off too short. And one of my students had commented that she really would have liked to see a solution done in fabric, because in the class I showed how to make a facing if you cut it off too short. So you can sort of sew on a piece of fabric, flip it up, and finish it that way. And so what I want to do is talk about the different options and when you would use them, and then I'm going to show you how to make a cuffed hem if you cut off the leg and it's too short. All right, so let me show you the samples that I used in the craftsy class, because I'm not going to show you how to do all three. I'm going to show you how to make a cuffed edge if you cut it off too much. And I'm going to explain the difference of when you would use these. The first thing is, let's say you're working on a pair of khaki pants, for example, okay, like this, and you cut off the hem so it's like perfectly the right length, or maybe it's a little bit longer and you just don't have enough room to turn up a hem. The way you would fix that is you would trim the leg so you have an exact seam allowance. So let's say, for example, you cut your leg so it's only a 1/4 inch longer than you need, okay, but again, you have nothing to turn up. Then what you would do is you would make a facing by making a strip of fabric that equals the width of your hem at the bottom, and then what you would do is you would sew it on using the seam allowance and flip it up to the wrong side. Now that's the way I finished this one. Okay, so this would be an example of a hem that's a pant leg that's too short, but not so short that you still can't turn up the very little bit with a seam allowance. You can add a different fabric. If you have this more of the same fabric, you can use that. If you want to use a pretty contrasting fabric, you can do that like I did here. And essentially it's as simple as even, you know, if you've got a little bit of a taper to it, you can make shaped side seams that agree with it, or you can use a bias piece of fabric and it would, you know, unless it's really tapered or really flared, it'll, you know, work for that. So that's how you would fix a hem that's too short, okay, just not enough for the allowance. Let's say you whack off way too much. Like let's say they're an inch too short. In that case, you can actually sew the leg that you cut off back on and create a cuffed hem. All right, and here's an example of that cuffed hem, okay? And you can see, I'm gonna unfold it so I'm gonna show you the lines. This seam right here is what I sewed back on. And then what I basically did was I turned the extra length up inside, and then I drew my lines to create the cuff. So I'm gonna show you how to do that step by step. Okay, so I lopped it off, and then when I tried them on to mark them finally for the hem, I realized, uh-oh, not only are they too short to hem, but they're also an inch too short. So the first thing I would do is sew this back on. All right, so see I've got the edges lined up and I've got my seams matching on the side seam and the inseam. So now basically what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna sew it back on, and I'm gonna use a, just the side of my presser foot as a guide for the edge. I'm gonna sew it back on. Okay, so here is what my pant leg looks like after I sew the leg back on. And what I'm gonna do now is, I think I'm just going to press it so the seam allowances are facing down. All right, I've got my pant leg, and what you need to do now is mark your real finish length that you needed. So in this case, it needed to be down an inch. So I'm gonna mark that with my chalk. All right, so now I've got where I really need my pant leg to be. I'm gonna mark the rest of my cuff. Now my cuff needs to be at least an inch high to cover the seam, because the seam is above it. So I'm gonna make 1¼ inch cuffs. Okay, so the first thing I'm gonna do is draw one line that's 1¼ inch below, like this. I need that amount to be the opposite or the inner side of the cuff, and then I need a little bit of extra to extend past that. So what I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna mark 1¼ inch plus, let's do 3/4 inch. So I'm gonna mark 2 inches below that, because that will give me room to turn the raw edge of the bottom edge of the pant leg under and finish it if I want to. If you're really tight on fabric, you can serge the edge so you're not using any extra fabric. But, you know, if you have enough and you want to turn it under, you know, you can plan for that. You need at least 1¼ inch plus a little bit more to sew it down. So I'm going to do 2 inches in this case, and I'm going to draw a line. Okay, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to trim off that extra, and I'm going to create the cuff. So the first thing we're going to do is I'm going to cut off, you know, you can use a rotary cutter or you can use scissors, but the whole idea is you do not want to cut, don't cut through both layers of your fabric at one time, because it might not be accurate on the other side if you cut straight through. So always when you're trimming your pant leg, cut through a single layer and just follow your guideline all the way around. Now the next step is I'm going to fold my pant leg up to my finished length, and I'm going to turn the whole thing under. Okay, so there's my finished length of my pant. All right, so if you have a sleeve board like this, it's really easy to turn it up and press it along the finished length line. So I'm just going to go around and I'm going to press it. All right, so you can see you've got your pant leg all nice and pressed up. Okay, and what you're going to do now is you're going to sew the top edge of the extra that you turned under. You're going to sew that to your pant leg, and the whole idea is where you sew it, the cuff is going to hide the seam between where you sewed the pant leg back on, and it's also going to hide the seam where you finished cuff to itself. So let me just fold up the cuff so you can see what I mean. All right, see how you can't see the seam anymore and you'd have a cuffed edge. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to turn this back inside out and stitch along my top edge of my cuff from the wrong side. And if this was a woven fabric, I would either have this serged or I would turn it under. Okay, so in this case, I'm just going to leave it because it's a knit. But just know that you would turn this under or finish it with the serger so it doesn't ravel. All right, so I'm just going to put in a few pins to hold it. And then I'm just going to stitch right along the edge. And so basically what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to stitch right along the edge. All right, so let me just do that. All right, so from the right side now, you can see that you've got your seam that you sewed the leg back on, plus you've got the seam where you sewed the inner part of the cuff to the pant leg. All right, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to fold up my cuff, okay, to the amount that I need. All right, now notice that it hides everything. Okay, so here's the completed cuff. And you can see that you've got your, you've got the part that you sewed in there, but the cuff is hiding all of that other stuff. And to keep your cuff up, what you would do is you would just tack it in the seam, on the side seam and the inseam right here. All right, so see what I did was I just sewed right there, just that little bit, and that will keep that from flopping down. So that's how you would finish or fix a pant leg that you cut too short, and how you would camouflage the fact that you cut it off and had to sew it back on. Just very quickly, on jeans or fabrics that don't show, you could sew it back on like this and then just press it and leave it. And actually that's how you would hem a pair of jeans that you bought in the store if you wanted to keep the original stitching. And I'll put a link to how to do this because there's so many tutorials that show how to just sew it back on, cut it and then sew it back on. So that would be another option for a fabric where the seam doesn't show. Even if you were making your jeans, you could do it this way. So this is a third way to do it. I'll put a link to that in the post that goes with this video. But in any case, that's how you create a cuffed hem to camouflage something that you cut too short. I hope this answers your craftsy question, and certainly if you need more help, please let me know. And if anybody has any questions or comments about how to make a cuff, please let me know. I hope you guys have a great day, and I'll see you on Quick Tip Thursday in the middle of all my volleyball sewing.